All right. Well, thank you all for joining who are in person, and I think we're going to be about to be on Zoom Live. My colleague James just gave me the thumbs up, so we're live. I'm somebody who likes to walk around the room, but Gita, my team member, tells me that I need to stay between the green lines so I'm visible on the Zoom screen, so I'll do that. First of all, I'm Wade Crowfoot, and I lead our Natural Resources Agency. You probably know that if you're here for this update. And thanks for taking time. It has been 6 years since I've been in this role, and it's been a remarkable 6 years. So I want to take an opportunity to share with you where I think our work stands, what we've been able to accomplish over the last year, and frankly the last 6 years, and the work we have moving forward. Let me start by saying it has been quite a beginning of the year. And I have spent as many days in Los Angeles as I have in Sacramento. So I'll first say how focused we are on helping the tens of thousands of Angelenos who have been impacted by these wildfires. Some of you may work on wildfires, but for those who don't, of 26,000 employees that we have across our agency, over 10,000 work at CAL FIRE, protecting us from catastrophic wildfire risk. We also have team members who work at the newest entity in our agency called Energy Safety, or the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. We also have the California Conservation Corps. We have so many people actually responding to these wildfires and working to keep people safe. And that makes me really proud. And we are more focused than ever on helping those impacted by the fires in Los Angeles actually recover and ultimately rebuild. We also obviously have a new president, which is creating quite a dynamic situation with the state of California, and I'll share a little bit about our approach with this dynamic. But let me first just share my thanks to you all who are working across the agency. We do so many different things. We are scientists, we are game wardens, as I said, we're firefighters. We are folks that work in the Office on Administrative Support. We're educators. We are across the state, like really every corner of the state our agency touches. And the work we do is tremendous. I think that it's probably safe to say that a lot of us, a lot of you don't get that acknowledgement on a daily basis. So I want to thank you for doing the work that you do. Our work has never been more important. I feel this in my bones. First and foremost, what I see as our job is to keep people safe. And that is to protect people from these changes that we're experiencing. These extreme events are getting more and more intense. Think about this. 3 weeks ago, I was in Los Angeles talking about what is the driest start to a winter that Southern California has ever faced. And we know that Southern California gets these Santa Ana winds that blow from the interior out to the coast. Those are warm winds that create wildfire threat. But never before had they experienced the dryness that they'd had. No measurable rain since, I think it was late April or early May of last year, broke a record. And for colleagues who just came in, you get to sit in the front row. It's like school or a place of worship. No one ever sits in the front row. And if you need to leave, I won't be offended that you, but at any event, as I shared, we've got about, I don't know, maybe 60 people in the room, and then we've got, I think, about 100 online. So in any event, we start out with this super dry winter, and then 3 weeks later, I was with the governor on Friday where we were looking at pre-positioned flood fighting equipment and boats, these swiftwater boats from the Sacramento Metro Fire Department, dealing with this remarkable swing of weather. And that's something we experienced 3 years ago, or about 2.5 years ago. The driest 3-year period in the state of California's history, followed a couple months later by what is probably the wettest 3 weeks in the state's history. So helping people across California, helping our landscapes, our nature adjust to that is fundamentally what we do. Drought, flood, wildfire, extreme heat, coastal impacts, including sea level rise and coastal erosion. In each of those categories, I could spend a lot of time explaining all of these impacts that we've experienced that we frankly never thought we'd experience this quickly. And it's the work of this agency and you all that's really on the front lines of protecting people and places from those climate impacts. So for that, I'm really proud. Our agency also plays a role in actually helping the state be a world leader in combating climate change. So we know that these extreme events, this extreme weather is being driven by climate change, but we also know there's a whole lot we can do to demonstrate that we can restabilize our climate. And I'm really proud to live in California, where we are forward focused, thinking about what is our economic future and recognizing that that's tied to our environmental leadership. We have a carbon neutrality plan across California to slash carbon pollution and then ultimately achieve what net zero carbon exists. And we're making great progress. The California Energy Commission is recognized around the world for its innovation to change the way that we produce energy, ultimately phase down and out fossil fuels and replace that with clean energy. And all the while reducing costs for consumers and building jobs that are going to power the economy for the future. So that's really exciting. And then some of you might be focused on what we know as carbon sequestration, which is how do we improve the management of our landscapes to actually store and remove carbon from our atmosphere. We know that catastrophic wildfire is actually taking things in the wrong direction. That wildfire smoke that we're breathing and also carbon emissions into our atmosphere. So there's a really important job that we can all be doing to sequester carbon. So I'm proud to be doing the work with all of you. I think we are making progress, and I wanted to just share a little bit of that progress from 2024 because I think it's worth noting. You may, if you haven't subscribed, once a month, our colleague Tony leads this. We do The Buzz, and it's essentially a newsletter that shares our progress, your progress. We are careful not to spam people's emails too much, I think, compared to a lot of newsletters. We essentially provide updates once a month. And in December, we actually highlighted what are really notable, very specific achievements that we accomplished across the agency. So I wanted to share that with you. One of the great news stories of 2024 is the completion of what is, oh, thank you, Gita. What is the completion of the largest river restoration project in American history that happened in your state, and actually thanks to your agency, and that is the removal of 4 obsolete dams on the Klamath River. The Klamath River is in the far northern portion of the state. California tribal leaders, communities have been driving for the removal of these dams for over 20 years. These are dams that don't really, don't provide an economical benefit to producing electricity now and in the future, but that require a whole lot of focus and will to actually remove. So tribes for 20 years drove this movement forward, and our agency and our state and our governor and legislature and Oregon came together to remove these dams. And in doing so, we restored over 400 miles of salmon habitat. The Klamath River was once the 3rd most abundant watershed for salmon on the Pacific coast. And those dams over 100 years significantly reduced the health of our salmon populations. So late last year, we were able to remove the final dam. And what's remarkable is within 1 week, our conservation allies began to identify fish actually making their way up the rivers into those tributaries. And then it was weeks later that folks got on the ground and actually saw the salmon returning and spawning. And that got international attention because of the scale of the restoration and the scale of the impact. For decades, those tribal leaders were told that this was not possible, including by our own agency. And then fast forward, we're able to do this in partnership with them. It's remarkable. And this work doesn't stop there. Our leader of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Chuck Bonham, is really focused on working with the utility and leaders and tribes on the Eel River around the potential of the restoration of the Eel River and the removal of what is now obsolete infrastructure. So that's one area I think we can all be really proud of that the world is watching. The other is if you're a team member, an employee in state parks, you know that California opened its first new state park in well over a decade at Dos Rios, the confluence of the San Joaquin and the Tuolumne River. It's a remarkable story, actually. This was land that for a very long time had sustained California tribes, and then, of course, it gets industrialized, it gets made into agriculture, and then fast forward several decades, a really visionary landowner and orchard owner decides to work with a conservation group and actually put that confluence of those two rivers back to a natural floodplain. Now that's important because you know that cities like Sacramento and Stockton face major flood risk. And one way we protect these communities is by building bigger levees, but we need to do more of allowing the rivers to roam during the wet season. And so this Dos Rios project was initially a flood protection project. Hey, you gotta come up to the front. I'll put you on the spot. And I did it to other people, so you're not alone. And so it started as a conservation project, but then the big idea, we had this idea around, well, maybe this can also provide access to communities in this part of the San Joaquin Valley that actually don't have access to the rivers. You know, this is one of the hottest places in California, but it's also one of the most park-poor regions of the state. So this really wonderful idea was born, is make this a seasonal floodplain that can flood up, but also make it a state park and build a community process that will ultimately get people down on those rivers, particularly as it gets hotter and hotter. And so we're so proud of our state parks director and Armando Quintero and his team to actually open that up. And we did so on Earth Day. I'll share on the wildfire front. We're spending a lot of time talking about this, as we should, because of the impacts in Los Angeles. You know, over the last 6 years, both our wildfire response and all these proactive upfront actions we take has significantly improved. CAL FIRE has gone from an agency with 5,000 people to over 10,000, specifically focused on how do we respond to wildfires more quickly and effectively. We now have more planes and helicopters than we think any government in the world to fight wildfires, which is saying something, including these huge C-130 federal planes that we actually brought into state service. We're also utilizing technology like we never have before. Over 1,000 cameras across the state at strategic ridgetops that are using artificial intelligence that will signal when an anomaly on the screen suggests smoke and immediately notify that fire unit, that first responder. And in the first 3 months alone, over 77 fires were actually extinguished before anyone called 911 as a result of that artificial intelligence. So we can be really proud of CAL FIRE for all of it does to respond. But we also have gotten a lot wiser about wildfire in California, recognizing that fire is part of our natural landscape. For over a century, we were really focused on trying to eliminate wildfire off the landscape. The idea is fire's bad. And it was actually tribes that for thousands of years were managing our landscapes through low-level, safe cultural fire, what we know as prescribed fire. And our agency actually outlawed that practice until fairly recently. And what we've now realized is that that prescribed fire, that cultural fire, is part of these upfront actions that we need to take, in addition to fuel breaks around communities that allow wildfire firefighters to take a stand, to reduce the density of our forests based on ecological principles. And about $3 billion has been spent, $3 billion with a B. And I think this is at least 50 to 100 times what any other state is actually spending. And that's resulted in over 2,000 projects across the state, either underway, but mostly completed, that are protecting communities. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have catastrophic wildfire. We just experienced in Los Angeles, but we are making progress. And I'm so proud that CAL FIRE now has an updated website where you can go on and see not only the real-time fire activity, but then you can actually learn where these projects are, these fuel breaks, these prescribed fire, vegetation management, and how they impacted the fires. And what we're finding is that they have really effectively impacted fires. And I want to give Christine from CAL FIRE a shout out. The CAL FIRE website, in the first 4 weeks of the year, can anyone take a wild guess how many hits it got? All right, well, you guys are shy. 70 million. Wow. 70, or more.
Over 70 million.
Over 70 million hits. And obviously a lot of that's because of the Los Angeles wildfires, but I'll tell you, if this was a meaningless, useless government site, you wouldn't get that traffic. You're getting traffic because CAL FIRE really challenged itself to provide this real-time information source for people. And if you go on it, it's a great example of what's happening across our agency, where we're doing a better and better job communicating with people about what they want to hear and what they want to know. Another key point of progress is the fact that now, I should say last year, for the full year, over 60% of the energy that powered California is from clean energy sources. So think about this. California, if we were a country, we'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. And almost 2/3 of our energy is from clean energy sources. That's renewable, solar, wind, but also hydro. We still have nuclear, which is 8%, which is carbon-free. And we are driving forward to actually get to 100%. So glad to see colleagues in the room who are driving this forward, whether it's offshore wind, expanding renewables, doubling down on energy storage, making sure that it's safe. We are marching down the field. And what's fascinating and I think really exciting is it's growing jobs. Over the last decade, we have drawn down over half of the venture capital, half the investment in the country in clean tech has come to California, in part because we've been driving and leading the way. So we're gonna continue to push forward to 100% clean energy, keeping in mind safety, reliability, and affordability. And we are making great progress. I'll share that on the conservation side, you may know that we in the state have this 30 by 30 goal to conserve and protect 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And it's an exciting effort. It's actually been an international movement. And believe it or not, through the United Nations, most every nation of the world has agreed to protect about 1/3 of our planet by 2030. Now, why is that important? It's important if you care about nature, fish and wildlife, but it's also important if you care about climate change. Because what these global scientists have identified through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, is that upwards of over 1/3 of the near-term actions that we can take to stabilize our climate involve protecting and restoring nature. So we recognize that in California. We decided to step up and say, okay, we're committed to this broad global effort to protect 30%, but we're going to do so in California. And we're going to do it using what we think is the strongest standard of what it means to be protected. And so at this point, we are just over 25% of our lands are protected and 16% of our coastal waters. And in the last 2 years, we've added about 1.5 million acres to that inventory of protected and conserved lands. So what does that look like and what does that mean? That means more land that's actually been returned to tribes, ancestral tribal land return, recognizing that the original stewards of California know very well how to steward these lands. It means more open space that has been conceived of by local conservation groups or local government that we've funded. It means more private landowners like ranchers putting a conservation easement on their land, so they're going to continue to ranch, but they're going to do so in an environmentally protective way that meets that standard. It means some really new, exciting ways of managing our state coastal waters, which you'll hear about more in coming weeks. It's been remarkable, and it was capped off, as my colleague Megan knows, by President Biden in one of his last official acts as president in establishing 2 new national monuments. Now, when I think about a monument, I think about a statue, but it's actually a national monument is a designation of federal land that's protected from industrialized uses. And it was this power was granted by Congress in 1906, over 100 years ago, been used by 18 presidents, Republicans and Democrats, to take areas of specific cultural and environmental sensitivity and then protect them in perpetuity. And I think we have about 18 of these national monuments in California. The first national monument, I believe, in the country was Muir Woods, when Muir Woods was slated for development. And Lassen National Park, for example, was first protected as a national monument. And so fast forward, there's been a remarkable partnership of California tribes and conservation groups that have led these efforts to expand national monuments, 2 of which happened during the Biden-Harris administration, and then establish these 2 new ones. So President Biden established the Chuckwalla National Monument, 600,000 acres in the eastern Coachella Valley, think around Palm Springs, contiguous with Joshua Tree, which is really, really important, both environmentally, because it's a sensitive desert area, but also culturally. There are remarkably culturally important places for the tribes in that area. And so the president actually, with a stroke of the pen, protected that land in perpetuity. Likewise, far to the north, east of Mount Shasta, is a place called Satitla, which we know in English as the Medicine Lake Highlands. It's about 20% of our basin that flows into the Sacramento River, so it's really, really important to our water supply. It's geologically really interesting on a shield volcano, and it's quite important to the Pitt River Nation. And that was another 200 some odd thousand acres that the president protected. All of that then goes into 30 by 30, and all of that will be proactively managed. All told, about half of our land in California is owned or managed by the federal government. So I'll talk about it in a little bit, this relationship with the new federal government, but all of our goals in California, all these goals we have across our agency relies on these partnerships. Let me get through, though, a few more just highlights, because I think it's worth noting our progress. We broke ground, thanks to the Department of Water Resources, on the largest coastal wetlands restoration in the state's history, 4,000 acres at Lookout Slough in the Delta. That's really important for a fish you may have heard of called the Delta smelt. It's been in the news a bunch, but it's also really important for a bunch of different fish species as well as wildlife in the Delta. And I would say a decade ago, a project of that size was almost incomprehensible. How would you get that through the permitting, et cetera? Continuing to cut the green tape, try to get projects done more quickly and effectively, and this Lookout Slough is a really good example of our progress. I'm really proud too that our California Conservation Corps, which every year brings upwards of almost 2,000 young people into state service. They serve for a year, often in a residential setting, at CAL FIRE camps, working with Fish and Wildlife, Caltrans, and we get folks from all over the state, every walk of life, every background imaginable. And historically, we've had a real barrier from folks getting into state service. So they serve in the Conservation Corps, but then they can't get a job at CAL FIRE or state parks or Department of Conservation. There have been these sort of institutional barriers. Well, we've worked to break those barriers and create a pathway. And I'm so proud of CAL FIRE in particular. 700 Corps members have been hired over the last 3 years into careers at CAL FIRE. And it's so fun when you meet a young person across California who's serving in the Corps, and you ask them what they want to do, and they have all sorts of different ideas, but some want to be CAL FIRE members or Fish and Wildlife folks or working in state parks, and now they're finding that pathway. You know, historically, we haven't done a good job accessing the full talent pool that is California. And we're working hard to ensure that actually our workforce reflects geographical diversity, diversity of backgrounds, race and ethnicity, gender balance. And these programs are actually helping us do this, and we're making great progress. Just a few more, because then I want to talk about the road ahead. In terms of size, we also kicked off by far the largest restoration, or expanded, I should say, the largest restoration project at the Salton Sea, which is on the southern border of California. You think about Klamath up north being that largest river restoration, and then the Salton Sea, which is a terminal lake, which has been shrinking due to more water conservation in the Imperial Valley. We actually expanded, thanks to our partnership with the federal government, upwards of also about a 4,000 acre project and counting. And then just a couple fun ones. These jobs can be about creativity, and I want to give a shout out to state parks for 3 creative options to help more Californians get outdoors. We call it Outdoors for All, and it's a way that we can actually ensure everybody can participate in the outdoors in our state. One is through providing state park passes at the library, free for checkout. Was sort of seen as a novelty idea, but it's been tremendously popular. And our assessment is actually finding that it's being heavily utilized in places where, and by people who have not traditionally accessed the park. So number one. Number two is creating essentially more of an automatic registration for people who are needy, who are getting food assistance with the state because of their need, actually automatically enrolling them into having a state parks pass. That remarkably has been used by a ton of people. And what we realize is that that $10 or $20 day use access, which may not be a barrier for some of us, is a barrier for others. And when we remove that barrier, people use it. It's great. And then the last one was, we can't claim that we invented this, we sort of stole it from the federal government, but is the 4th grade Adventure Pass. So last year my daughter was in 4th grade, and I actually went online and I could download a pass because she's in 4th grade to actually visit sort of key state parks across the state. And what we're seeing is that's opening a whole lot more people to state parks. So those are just ideas that I love. Ultimately, Governor Newsom, we all love, because they're interesting, exciting ways that we can get people outdoors, which is one of our core priorities. So let's talk about the road ahead, because that's obviously on our mind, that there has been this, high-profile change of administration, and it's been a highly dynamic couple of weeks. Let me repeat what Governor Newsom said, which is, regardless of political party or past differences, we're really focused in finding ways to work with this new administration. At the end of the day, the people that we care for are Californians, but they're also Americans. And whether it's providing water security, providing healthy environmental conditions, ensuring that we have safe, reliable, affordable electricity, these should be shared goals. And so our focus is now and will always be, where can we find the common ground? At the same time, our leaders have said we are going to continue to protect, California's values. I'm so excited that it's the first day of our celebration of Black History Month. And you can rest assured that over this year and in coming years, we will celebrate this month and all of our heritage months. I'm so proud, and one of the most fun and most important parts of my job is lifting up this shared history we have. Yeah, you're getting our all of the events here behind me. It's remarkable, when we do these heritage months, we get leaders from across departments and our agencies that come together, and they identify how can we lift up these different aspects of our culture and history in fun ways. So they bring people together, they expand our horizons, and they ultimately lift up parts of our history and culture that we want to celebrate. To me, being an American is being within this incredible diversity of people and cultures, and we're going to continue to lift that up. So special thanks if you participated in this month's organization, and then moving forward. Because at the end of the day, our job is to, again, protect Californians, give them access to the outdoors, and of course protect nature for Californians, and we do that for all Californians. And we recognize that we need to be affirmative and proud that we're doing that for all Californians by continuing to lift everyone up. There's all sorts of questions right now about the federal spending freeze and what that means to California. There are billions of dollars of federal spending that have been committed into California for water infrastructure, for energy infrastructure, certainly for environmental restoration, projects and programs that impact people. So we have been making the case to the administration that we need to honor what has been allocated to Congress and enable that funding to get spent moving forward. In just a moment, I want to take any kind of questions that you have, but I'll say something around the current environment, and that is the role that we all have as government employees to provide clear and factual information. We experienced over the last month fighting these fires in Los Angeles, a lot of misinformation that ultimately was harmful to our first responders, to those who are fighting fires, and distracting from the work ahead of us. And so we've been really focused on being a counterpoint to that misinformation by providing clear, accessible information. And so I think that's just a job for all of us moving forward, is continuing to do that, because that's going to be really quite important in the months and years to follow, is providing Californians the information that they need, both to live their lives, to access our parks, to figure in on decisions that we make, and it's going to be more critical than ever. I guess last I'll say is, we are what I consider in the fourth quarter of the Newsom administration. So the governor, has 2 terms, and he was reelected, and we're in the final 2 years. And jobs like mine have a shelf life of the governor. So I can tell you that over the next couple of years, my focus is to execute on all of these targets, these commitments that our governor and legislature have made, and to institutionalize what's working. At the end of the day, the political appointees come and go, and well over 90%, probably 99% of our employees across 26,000 people are those of you who have decided to make your career here. And you'll be here long after people like me are left. And that's why I've been so focused over the last several years on trying to communicate with what we're doing from where I sit, and to really lift up the best ideas and work that you all are doing across the agency. I'm so proud to be a Californian, never more than I am now, and I'm so optimistic about California, even as we face these daunting challenges, whether it's driven by climate change or other stressors. We are stronger together. We're stronger together as a state, and we're stronger together as an agency. So I am appreciative of all you do. I'm looking forward to more shared progress in 2025 and beyond. And with that, I'm going to turn it to my colleague Geeta to.
I'm going to tell you guys, we do not have an additional mic. If you have questions, please raise your hand and ask your question. If you could repeat the question for the audience.
Yep. For those who are joining online, Geeta just said there's one mic in the room. So for those who are in the room that have a question or a comment, if you want to share it, then what I'll do is I'll verbalize it back into the mic for all those who are joining by Zoom. And I'm told you get a day off by your manager if you're the first one to ask a question. I'm picking on you because you raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm gonna be calling out my manager, so we'll figure it
You
out.
said it. That's right. You said it.
Damari with Delta Stewardship Council. This is like my 65th day on the job. So I wanted to ask 2 questions. One question is, how are you taking care of yourself in this time, in this season, especially with your role, especially with consideration of your family? It would be just great to know how you're taking care of yourself, or even if you're able to.
Yeah, thanks. And Jamari?
Yeah.
Jamari from the Delta Stewardship Council in his 65th day, which is incredible.
Not counting.
Yeah, we want you to turn into 30 years of a career, but we're excited that you're here.
Thank you.
So the question was on self-care, and we actually talked about this at our executive team today, as those colleagues who could say who were there. And how am I taking care of myself during this challenging time? Doing the best I can, doing the best I can. This has been, in 6 years, this has been the most challenging month in 6 years, and that's saying something. We had the driest 3 years in California history, essentially the worst drought. We had the fire sieges in 2012. We had the longest, hottest heat wave, and we've had a lot. We had COVID. We've had a lot of challenges, and this has been a very, very trying month. And I'll tell you personally, I really work to try to create time for myself and my family. One thing I tell my team is I take this, this beautiful tool, which is also a chain to work, and I put it in a certain drawer in my kitchen. I try to do it from 5:30 to 8 every night. I've got a 10-year-old daughter who is very sensitive and aware of when I'm responding to the phone. Now I can tell you, I've not abided that rule in the last month, and it's been really hard. I think it's hard because these jobs that each of us do may have, included more than usual, let's say on the fires, but it's also hard because just the enormity of what's happening across our world. And I won't make it political, but there's a lot happening. And so from my perspective, being really disciplined around turning it off at times is helpful. I told my team that for half a day this weekend, I let my phone go because what I was getting and what I was looking at on social media was creating that sense of overwhelm. Also, I would say that for all of us, we've got to support each other, and we got to recognize that really whatever one's politics are, whatever one's job is, we have different challenges at different times. And so we want to be a place where people feel supported and people support each other. So what I told my team is, look, when you need to take a moment and you let people know that, you're not able to do something right away, or you need to let people know. Because what we're trying to do in our office, but hopefully, across the agency, is be a place that people want to work. They want to work because of the mission, but also because of their coworkers and because of the supportive environment. And I'm not naive to the fact that there's workplace dysfunction in departments across a 26,000 person agency. But I really hope that we support each other, because at the end of the day, that's what makes the work possible. So thank you, Jamari.
Thank you.
And you do get that day off, so I'm just kidding.
Before we move on with one question
Yeah.
here, but anyone in the room first? After you.
Just wanted to say, as someone who's from Los Angeles, whose family members were in the evacuation order zone, I want to thank you for your leadership, for stepping up, for, as you said, spending as much time down there as you have here over the past month, and not just in terms of your response to the crisis, but even anticipating and proactively looking at sources of knowledge like traditional ecological knowledge, where last fall during the Secretary Speaker Series, you brought in speakers to talk about these very issues. And also in terms of the messaging, I see my friends, my family members sometimes repeating this information and seeing how CNRA and its member departments and entities have responded with facts, but without creating more problems with working with the federal government. Really, I think very astute messaging there that has really helped to calm things down and help people understand context. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And remind me of your first name.
I'll tell you.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to say, so the question is, both the question and a comment. Well, a comment, and really more of a comment. One is that thanks to us who are focused in Los Angeles, as somebody whose family has been impacted, the scale of the devastation is massive. And I think that's what you spend a lot of time there. And, wildfires are brutal, and they take lives, and they take homes and everyone possessions from people. And what we're seeing here is thousands upon thousands of families impacted, and it's really emotional, and it's really hard, and we're focused on being there for the long haul. So thank you for that. And then also just acknowledging that we in our Secretary Speaker Series, which we do about once a month, twice a month, where we bring leaders from outside of government, talk about priorities, try to have a candid conversation. We did one last year on tribal ecological knowledge as part of the solution. I'll share also, we're really focused with our state fire marshal on continuing to advance policy around preventing wildland fires from becoming urban fires, which is a little less about traditional ecological knowledge, but it's, part of the challenge in these fires is, you had those homes that were on the border of the natural areas that caught fire, and then essentially got much bigger because of the home-to-home conflagration. So we're really focused and been doing some good work you'll hear more about around how do we reduce that. I'll also make an open invitation. These speaker series, at the end of every speaker series, we put up an email, and it says if you have an idea around something we should share, or some issue you want to delve into, let us know. Pete actually has it up here. So let us know about opportunities to, bring up other topics. I really want to continue to be a voice. Your last point was just appreciated the departments being really clear about the information without then getting into a political back and forth. So we're going to try to continue to provide that information. We had a question online I want to answer, and it's about what are we doing on sea level rise, climate adaptation on sea level rise. I am proud that sea level rise is something you don't hear as much about compared to wildfires or droughts, and I think some people feel like it's not as much of a clear and present danger. But the fact is, it's having major impacts. You may know that the major train service from Los Angeles to San Diego has been completely derailed, disrupted, as a result of coastal erosion driven by sea level rise. We're also seeing sea level rise and erosion actually be a major danger on state beaches. And then if you work in the Delta or on the Delta, you know that sea level rise is bringing saltwater intrusion further and further into the Delta. So there's a lot that we need to be doing. We can't treat it like it's something decades in the future. It's here and now. We're seeing sunny day flooding, which means when there's a certain tidal influence, we're seeing parts of Imperial Beach in Southern California, even Marin County, actually flooding. So it's a here and now thing. The good news is we have actually an action plan that was developed across over a dozen state agencies. It's called something bureaucratic sounding like the State Action Plan to Combat Sea Level Rise. But it's actually a very clear action plan in terms of what we're working to do. And the Coastal Commission is involved in that. Very thankful for all that they're doing. the Ocean Protection Council, the Coastal Conservancy, our state parks, which has about 700 miles of coastline. So they're all focused on it. And it was interesting, the genesis of that was, we had these commissioners from the Coastal Commission come to us and say, look, we're dealing with this on a permit by permit basis, where there's these impacts of sea level rise. This was 6 years ago, but we don't really have a plan. So then we're having to make these permit by permit decisions based on sea level rise, but what's the plan? So that was really sort of a kick in the pants to get ourselves together. And we're now investing significant amounts of funding. And this Proposition 4, which is known as the Climate Bond, which just passed with voters in November, is allocating over $10 billion of funding into the state to protect people and landscapes from the future impacts of climate change, one of which is the coast. So you'll see a lot of funding going to our coastal agencies to protect against sea level rise.
Another question from the audience, online audience.
Yeah. Yeah, can you address the impact of wildlife on wildlife from the Los Angeles fires? You know, if I had time and inclination, I'd ask my colleague Megan to come up because she was just in Los Angeles, but we're seeing impacts to anadromous fish or migrating fish. We have Southern California steelhead, which are an imperiled species of fish that migrate into the rivers in Southern California with major impacts from the wildfires into the Santa Monica Mountains. And my colleague Megan Hurdle, who leads our biodiversity and habitat work, partnered with Fish and Wildlife to actually rescue some of those stranded fish. So that's major impact. We're also seeing, I mean, what's incredible about Southern California and Los Angeles is all of the nature that coexists with this megapolis. You know, we know that mountain lions, for example, live in Southern California, any manner of mammal and life, and those are majorly impacted by the wildfires, the loss of habitat. I think, I'll tell you, right now we've been really focused on the impacts to people and protecting people from the post-fire potential debris flow and flooding. So I haven't got my head around the impacts to our nature and wildlife. But no doubt there have been impacts. We did some, as I said, emergency rescues of fish, and there'll probably be more that we'll learn and more that we'll have to do in coming months. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I'm just gonna comment, Secretary, for those who don't know, I'm Elizabeth, I'm at the California Energy Commission. I'm the division that does the regulatory work for and I wanted to share how important these are that you give. You know, wanting quality time with my daughters over the weekend, we found ourselves at a place where there were volleyball teams, girl volleyball teams, and they were from Moss Landing. And they were, you know, when I told them about the Energy Commission, they started asking questions. And of course, we don't oversee batteries, but we do the plant. But these conversations, I learned that the conservation easement worked and protected the habitat down there, and they were so happy to hear these things that they haven't really heard in the paper. So I appreciate these meetings you do every month because and the buzz, because you are sharing some great stuff that we all are complementary in what we're doing. Sometimes we don't even realize how we're complementing each other. So thank you for hosting these.
Well, huge thanks, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is helping lead this major ambitious effort to build offshore wind, which is a really visionary and critical part of our energy future. And she was at a volleyball tournament with her daughters, and they met others from Moss Landing, which is the site of a major battery storage fire in the last week and a half, and a lot of questions came in about that. And I think your reflection was, or at least what I take is, you know, we are oftentimes so siloed in our government work. You know, we have our day jobs, everyone's sort of head down, which is important, but sometimes it's helpful to look up and out and actually understand how things connect. And that's what we've been trying to do at the Office of the Secretary, is really help people understand at a big picture, what are we doing? And I think to your average Californian, particularly those outside of government, everyone's busy. You know, it's a luxury to actually be able to delve into issues in a deep way. And government historically hasn't been the best at actually explaining what it's doing. So to me, I'm really proud of the work that we do collectively, and I think we all have a job to do to help people understand that. And not in a complicated website that uses policy speak to explain something, but in ways that people can understand and care about. You know? So thank you for that.
Related to that, actually, could you speak briefly to the Colombian conference that you attended?
Oh, yeah.
And what the world thought of California?
Yeah, it's a great question. So some of us were actually in a place called Cali, Colombia at the end of the year. Maybe you're scratching your head saying like, whoa, if you're working in California, what are you doing in Colombia? Well, it's really interesting because a lot of these issues that we deal with, climate change certainly, but also the health of nature and biodiversity, are not issues that stop at the California borders, obviously. You know, we could be wildly successful with achieving our climate targets to slash pollution and improve the sequestration. And if nowhere else in the world does that, our climate doesn't change. Likewise, with biodiversity and 30 by 30, we could be successful in California, but we're not gonna see the stabilization, of our planet unless the rest of the world is doing it as well. And what's remarkable is California is a leader in this respect. And California is known worldwide, in part because of our size and our economy, but also in part because of, what California represents to people. Part of it is our entertainment industry, but, virtually everywhere I go, people know California. And on these topics, they respect California and they look to our leadership. So when we went to Colombia, this was a United Nations summit on biodiversity. And I mentioned that agreement where essentially 196 countries in the world came together and they all agreed to actually work to combat extinction. There's a massive trend toward extinction. They call it the sixth extinction on the history of our planet, and the first one caused by humans. And it's happening right now. And so the UN came together to actually create this global treaty to protect biodiversity. And this convening in Colombia was the annual summit of all of those entities. Now, we can't sign up as a signatory because we're not a nation state, and the United Nations is countries, but we're what's called a subnational, think states, provinces, cities, and we're actually officially involved in the treaty. And we go there and we get to talk about our pathways to 30 by 30. The fact that we've achieved 1.5 million acres of additional conservation and what we're doing. And we learn a lot too. I always go, and we always try to go in a humble way because there's plenty to learn as well. But I would say we stand up and share what's happening in California. And remarkable things happen. I mean, we now have a network of governments from Mediterranean climates around the world, for example. We have a Mediterranean climate in California that are experiencing wildfire, drought, extreme heat. We're all experiencing the same thing. Think about Greece, Spain, but also parts of South Africa, Australia, Chile. And these global convenings actually helped us realize that we're all facing the same challenges. And so now we have this global network where we're helping each other address these challenges. And technical people are working together, and then people at the political level like myself are also working to build a voice for what we need to do. So the international dimension is really, really important. Never more important than now, because one of the first things that the Trump administration did, obviously, is they withdrew from that global agreement on climate change called the Paris Accord. And what's interesting is, if you think about America, federal, the national leadership matters, but so does states. And there are 24 states representing 55% of the economy, 60% of the population that have leadership that's driving hard to build clean energy, reduce pollution, build green jobs, protect health, all through this climate action. And what we will tell people over the next 4 years is we will continue to go to these international convenings, and we say, America's all in. You may not hear from that from our new president, but America's in, and we're going to continue to make progress. And that was really helpful during the first Trump administration, and I presume it will be over the next 4 years. Yeah.
Bart Cruz, retired annuitant with CDC. So I was on sabbatical at the University of Colorado Boulder during the Marshall Fire, and 1,000 houses burned under similar conditions as LA. And 2 years later, everything was rebuilt with some mitigation, like cutting back natural vegetation near the home, having non-combustible gates and fences on the eaves. Kind of similar to what happened after the Skirball fire here in LA in 2017. Is there a vision for how LA might do it better? Like you mentioned sea level rise and all those houses that burnt along the beach in Malibu. Are those going to be rebuilt, or can we build Pacific Palisades better?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Bart's a retired annuitant from CEC, and he referenced a fire in Colorado where it was a really fast-moving fire. It was in an area that, was actually down in the flatlands, I think, right? It wasn't up in the forest. But what happened is a lot of destruction, and I think some lives lost because, houses caught each other on fire. And fences, for example, were wicking the fire from house to house, which is a major challenge. And we have that challenge in California. I mean, that's again why, both in the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire, you saw that conflagration among houses. Defensible space gets talked about a lot, and it matters. The idea of having space between your home and combustible materials saved homes. I've been in those fire scars. I have videos on my phone. You will have a home in the middle of a burned out block, and you look at that home, and its building materials are fire resistant, doesn't have eaves, it's done home hardening, it has defensible space. And that's not to suggest that will always defend a home, but it matters. So we're really excited about this movement in California towards Zone Zero. Zone Zero is essentially, our legislature has told us to work through our Board of Forestry, as well as our State Fire Marshal, to advance a requirement that 5 feet from your home can't have combustible materials. So whether it's a tree, whether it's the mulch, whether it's the wood fence that goes all the way to your home, and that's going to be really, really important. We're also updating our maps, our high hazard maps, to ensure that they're updated in both what's called the local responsibility area, that's the responsibility of local governments. That's also important. So people need to understand that they're in a high hazard area and then actually move towards that. So that is very much the vision, is continue to do the work in the natural landscapes to enable firefighters to stop fires, to get more prescribed fire on there, to essentially enable a safer, more natural wildfires, fire ecology, but then to prevent this home-to-home conflagration in cities. Yeah, thank you for that. We're coming up on the hour. I might just ask if there's one more question. Did I exhaust your questions? Any more questions online?
No more phenomenal.
All right. Well, listen, huge thanks for those who joined in person and for those who joined online. It's an honor to do this work together. It's really, really important. It's never been a more important time to do this work in government. And also, as Jamari asked about, it's never been a more important time to take care of ourselves so that we can continue to serve California. So thanks for all the work that you do and that we'll continue to do together. Appreciate it.